This transition question is a little different because the transition word is not starting a sentence, but it still is basically the same. We have two sentences here. We're going to want to think about sentence 1 as it relates to sentence 2. The fact that there's this like a little extra intro clause at the beginning of sentence 2 shouldn't affect things. However, we might need to make a slight adjustment if we're trying to convert these answer choices back into the 4 transition categories that we want to use to try to better understand what's going on. So all 4 categories are represented by these answer choices. Likewise is basically a fancy way of saying and or also. However, is a slightly fancy way of saying but, though that is a common word that you use. Therefore is basically so, and for example is the category word there. It just means we have an example. So all 4 categories are represented by these answer choices. And so when we're trying to plug in the simple word to maybe better understand what's happening, we might need to rearrange that intro clause a little bit so it sounds okay. So I'm going to try to do that. Let's just read what we have first. Most of the planets that have been discovered outside our solar system orbit G-type stars like our sun. In 2014, researchers identified a planet orbiting Kelt 9b, a B-type, or Kelt 9, a B-type star more than twice as massive and nearly twice as hot as the sun, called Kelt 9b. It is one of the hottest planets ever discovered. So B and G seems different, so we probably want to show that difference, but let's plug in the but, and I'm going to try to rearrange things slightly so it actually fits in the blank. Most of the planets that have been discovered, outside our solar system orbit G-type stars like our sun. But in 2014, researchers identified a planet orbiting Kelt 9, a B-type star, more than twice as massive and nearly twice as hot as our sun. So there, I think the but makes it clear, right? Most are this type of G star, but we have this new one that's a B star. It's not like a positive and negative contrast, but it certainly is some sort of difference, and that's what the word but does. It shows that two things are different. So that fits, and maybe you could have gotten that without doing this rearranging or without doing the simpler version but, since however is not the complicated of a word, but I just want to remind you that these options are available to you so that when you do have harder versions of these questions, you have different ways of understanding the relationships to those sentences that don't rely on you just kind of picking words that are familiar, because however is a familiar word, but things like likewise and therefore, they're not as common in our everyday language, so we might be a little bit more reluctant to pick them even when they fit, just because we're just not as familiar with those words, and that is not an okay reason to go through these things. We want to make sure we're thinking about the meaning of the word, not whether we like the word ourselves. So just try to think about the categories, and you'll be able to turn all of these complicated words back into simpler ones.